Recording live in the lucky number 7 lounge. This is Dine, Drink Vegas, the podcast by and for everybody stuck at home, wishing they were in the land of neon lights and bad decisions. I'm your host, John, aka the baller on a budget, and you've stumbled across episode number 55. Let's talk turkey, where we're going to dive deeply into our drink of the day. We're going to close out our Labor Day review segment with our thoughts about what's good at the W, and we're going to give you some Las Vegas news stories that we thought were interesting. That's why we stole them from other content creators. But before we can do any of that, it's time to welcome the founder of Dine, Drink Travel and Dine, Drink Vegas himself. Yes, of course, I am referring to the high roller, formerly of the High Plains, the leader in the luxury lounge, the king of comps, the Alabama slammer, the man who's always waiting on that limo to carry him away to his next luxury destination. Of course, I mean Bill. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, John. How are you today?
Bill, I am doing pretty good. I'm coming off a bit of a stomach bug, and I have not had an adult beverage in a couple of days. So I'm very much looking forward to the drink of the day, and we are switching it up. We're not doing a cocktail. I'm going to let you tell people what we're about to drink, and then I'm going to walk them through how and why we're going to drink it that way. So, Bill, since you actually picked this week, why don't you let us in?
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are drinking Wild Turkey 101. We're just drinking a straight shot of bourbon, and the reason we picked this one is severalfold. One, it's one that John can get in his market in Texas and that I can shockingly get here in my market in Alabama. Also, because this is a podcast about Vegas and the most popular airline flying into Las Vegas is Southwest Airlines, you can get Wild Turkey on Southwest. So this is one of the bourbons that you can get to pregame before you arrive in Vegas in the first place. The other thing is that is it my favorite bourbon? No. But it is an excellent bourbon that you can get at a low cost that is freely available pretty much anywhere. And unless you are living in Saudi Arabia right now, in which case you're probably not listening to this particular podcast, you can probably access this particular bourbon.
And honestly, a lot of people are scared of Wild Turkey. It has an association with cheap booze. I think a lot of people have some really bad, regrettable college party memories tied to Wild Turkey. And that's because it's affordable. But honestly, it's a really high quality bourbon. And if you get into the whiskey nerd land, sure, there's going to be other bottles that whiskey nerds will gravitate towards. Very few whiskey nerds will say Wild Turkey's their favorite, but very few will trash it. This is a really well-crafted bourbon, available at a good price. Bill pointed out you can get it on the plane. You can get it wherever you live. Also, I don't think I've ever been to a bar in Vegas that didn't have this one on the shelf. So if you have an affinity for it, you can get it anywhere. So now I want to talk about how we're going to drink this tonight. And listeners, when I say this, you're going to be tempted, some of you, to stop this podcast and jump to something else. So I promise you we are not about to be pretentious, but we are going to do a simplified version of a proper spirits tasting. And I know most of us have stumbled across a video of some arrogant jerk sniffing a glass of wine going, oh yes, I could tell that it picked up subtle hints of strawberries because it was a dry year in 2019 in Bordeaux. We're not going to be doing that kind of tasting. We are not going to try, to overanalyze this, talk about terroir or anything else. But the reason why you want to take the time to smell a spirit and taste it neat is because, when Bill and I are making cocktails, you'll notice that sometimes, because we're in different locations, we'll use different ingredients because sometimes you can't get a hold of an ingredient that a cocktail calls for. Sometimes you don't want to go to the store. You want to rock with what you've got at the house. Sometimes a recipe sounds good, but there's one ingredient that you don't like. Having familiarity with how different spirits, modifiers, and wines taste gives you the ability to sub out. So think of it this way. If you're cooking a sauce and you discover that you don't have any oregano, but you do have basil, you can make that substitution, but you really need to understand how those two herbs taste differently so you can make other adjustments to your sauce, right? Same thing with cocktails. If it calls for one type of spirit, but you've got something else, or one type of modifier, one kind of amaro or whatever, but you've got something else, you want to know how these things taste on their own so you could think about, well, if I make a change here, I've got to account for any flavor imbalances over here. So, Bill, what we're going to do, and you and I both have fancy whiskey tasting glasses. These are called Glencairn glasses. They were developed for Scotch tasting. Listeners, if you don't have this, you can do this with a brandy snifter. You could do this with a wine glass. Like, you do not have to have a special tasting glass. You don't. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to smell it. Now, this is 101 proof. So, fair warning, Bill, the first thing you're going to smell is booze, right? And you want to have your mouth open and then just breathe through your nose and just think about what do you smell?
So, and I'm nervous to have this conversation with you, John, because you're much more of a whiskey expert than I am. But I'm not going to lie, what I'm smelling smells a lot like vanilla.
Yeah, that makes sense. And listeners, listen, and I'll say this to Bill too. One of the things that people hate about tasting notes is you can't necessarily smell or taste what somebody else did. All of our noses and palates are unique. We will not all register the same scents and flavors. As you do this with practice, you'll pick up more subtle things and a wider variety of things, but you still may not smell or taste what the next person does. And that's okay, right? So when you read tasting notes, you might not get that. But vanilla, absolutely, we should expect that on any bourbon because that's coming from the oak barrel. Bill, did anything else stand out to you?
So, and I guess this is a cousin of the vanilla, but I'm smelling something that smells a lot like a caramel. Now, that's a less dominant scent than the vanilla is here, but I'm smelling something sweet, which I wouldn't expect because this isn't a high-end bourbon. It's a bourbon with a high rye concentration in it as a secondary grain. It's also, at 101, it's a fairly high proof, but what I'm smelling is things which I would associate with sweet notes, like a vanilla and a caramel. So, A, John, how does that register with you? And B, what is it that you're smelling here?
So I picked both of those up, and I will say I don't get a lot else, and I think that's because it is high proof. Now, you and I both had our glasses sitting out and airing. I will say I took a sniff after I first opened and poured, and almost all you got was the alcohol heat. So when you're doing a higher proof whiskey, let it breathe a little bit. But there's something I want to see if I could pick up. So I've got about a teaspoon of water, and yes, you can dilute your whiskey. I know the whiskey snobs out there, don't do that. We want to be able to smell it, and I'm just putting like about a teaspoon of water into an ounce and a half here of my bourbon, and I'm just going to give that a swirl. And I want to see if anything else comes to the surface because as you add dilution, it will change the scent a bit.
All right, so I'm doing the same thing. I've got a little bit of ice that melted.
It's mostly, again, the vanilla and the caramel. But I'm finally picking up one of the flavors and scents that I associate with Wild Turkey products and with Jim Beam products. I get a little hint of like peanut brittle, like that sweet cooked peanut thing, just a hint.
So I am not getting that, but I trust your judgment here.
But it's not really strong in the nose. And again, it also can be sometimes you get an idea in your head and you'll taste it whether it's there or not. This is all very subjective. But as you pointed out, Bill, this is not, this is only a 4-year-old or 4 to 6-year-old bourbon. It's not bonded, so we don't have an exact age statement. But most people say turkey blends somewhere between 4 and 6 years old. So this is not a 12-year-old where you expect a lot of complexity. So yeah, it's mostly going to be that vanilla and caramel. Let's go ahead and go to the sip. And mine is diluted a little bit. I'm probably down to about 90 proof now.
So I'm not going to lie, John. I taste oakwood chips and not in a way that's great. Now, to be clear, listeners, usually when I have my bourbon, I have diluted it over quite a great deal of ice. I poured a few drops of water in here, but it's still... if it was originally 101 proof, it's probably still like 97 proof. So it's a
Mhm.
relatively high proof bourbon. Um, I'm not tasting the things I smelled. Why is that, John?
Well, partially because taste and aroma are two different things. And I also think that one of the things that happens with bourbon is the alcohol heat sort of tamps down the sweetness that our nose is picking up. So the vanilla and caramel you were smelling before come out of the barrel, but there's also tannins in there. If you've ever had, and I'm talking to a Southern boy, so I know you have, if you've ever had tea that was steeped too long and was a little too much of that tea bag, right? And you start to get those slightly bitter tannic acids from a glass of tea, almost to the point that the tea can dry out the back of your mouth. I don't know if you've ever just forgot and left tea steeping for an hour and come back. I think most Southerners have had that experience. Oak barrels carry that, so you get a little bit of those tannins, and it's not bitter the way biting into the bitter piece of a pecan would be, but it definitely comes across as a little bit harsher, a little bit woodier. So you start to get rather than the vanilla and the caramel aspects of the barrel, you start to get the wood notes. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. So are we
As
at
as
a
host Wade,
point?
do you get anything else?
Not yet, but are we at a point where I can pour this over some ice, or do you want me to keep
Yeah, let's
sipping
go
it
ahead and do
neat?
that.
All right,
No, we're
fair.
good. We're not going to belabor the point. It is a pretty straightforward bourbon, right? I will say that on the first sip, just like you, all I got was that oak. As I let it dry on my tongue and I went in for a second or third sip, I did get again little hints of that peanutty flavor that to me is the hallmark of that. And I'm going to go ahead and swirl this around in my eyes to get it cool a bit, but I want to get it back up to a fuller strength. So we're gonna.
So I will say, while you're pouring, John, I just poured mine over the ice. My ice had been sitting around for a few minutes and had a little bit of melted water. Not much, but just a little bit. And I already like it better. And we've talked about this before. I tend to prefer bourbons at a slightly lower proof than you enjoy. And
Yeah.
lowering this down to something like an 80 or a 90 proof from the 101 proof originally, I I already like it better. It tastes, and I realize softer isn't a way that something tastes, but it tastes softer than it did before in a way that I happen to enjoy.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. You're going to hear the hardcore people out there going, never water down, no bourbon, no ice, no whatever. If you like your whiskey better diluted, drink it that way. If you like it better cold, drink it that way. I buy the high proof stuff because you can always dilute a strong bourbon. You cannot make a weak bourbon strong again. Very often, I will drink mine at 80 proof or even lower. I will go with ice, I will go with water. Sometimes I want it at that 101 proof. Sometimes with the cast strength, I'm with 116 or 120 proof. I do recommend buying the high proof ones because I mean, if you think about it, you get more bang for your buck because you can always water it down, right? But there's nothing wrong with don't let the whiskey police tell you that you can't add water or ice. And from a cocktail point of view, since normally we're doing cocktails, you're going to get dilution in the cocktail anyway, right? So, with that said, one of the reasons we did this is I want the listeners to realize if you've got a cocktail recipe that calls for a high proof or a highly aged bourbon and you sub out for like a not very well aged 80 proofer, you're not going to get as much flavor coming across. You may actually need to increase the amount of spirit to make up for what you're losing, right? This is where we start thinking about those balances. Because believe it or not, if you make a cocktail with Wild Turkey 80 proof, Wild Turkey 101 proof, and Wild Turkey rare breed. So you're going to have three different proof statements and two different ages because the 80 and the 101 are the same age. You're going to get three different cocktails. They all three contain Wild Turkey, but the age statement and the proof statement do make an impact in how it mixes. So when you're subbing out, you got to think, and the flip side's true too. If it calls for a very basic 80 proof bourbon and you go add a high proofer, you're going to throw the cocktail into a different direction. You may like it better that way, but you need to know going in, I'm making a change to the cocktail, right? So that's part of the reason why we wanted to do that, is to give the listeners the idea that when you're dealing with 101 proof younger bourbon, you're going to get alcohol heat. You're not going to get a lot of complexity and nuance because it did not have time to age in the barrel and evolve over time. But you are going to get the rawness of the barrel because it's been in there long enough to soak something up, right? And so this is it's not very subtle, it's not very nuanced, but it is very intense and it's very in your face. It has its place, but you got to be aware, how is this going to affect the cocktail I'm making? With that in mind, Bill,
actually,
are there cocktails you would do with this one?
So there are, but I've actually got a comment before we go to that. So you were talking about the rawness of the barrel, and I think that's one of the reasons that I tend to like Irish whiskeys so much. Set aside the fact that I've got a child in school there and soon to be two. It's that American bourbon has to be in first use oak cask, like it's never been used before. So it's gonna be a wood that's still imparting all of its original flavor. What Irish whiskeys do is they're still aged in wooden barrels, but they've almost universally been used for some other whiskey, typically American bourbon. What that means is that it's softer because a lot of the harshness of the wood has already been absorbed into the whiskey, and you've also got some secondary notes of whatever it was
Right.
aged in. So yeah, I think that's probably why I enjoy a lot of the Irish whiskeys I enjoy so much. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And to expand on what you're saying, to be a bourbon, and by the way, Tennessee whiskey falls in the same category. It must be a brand new, never before used American white oak barrel that has not just been toasted, it must be charred, right? That has a very distinct flavor profile. Sometimes it can come across as kind of marshmallowy, vanilla-y, but the tannins can be more present because the flame has really set in there, and you're going to get that char, not smoky like we think of as a Scotch from peat, but like literal wood fire smoke. If you have a barrel that's, say, made out of French oak that's been toasted, French oak is it's a different flavor profile for the wood, but also toasting the wood is just like bread, right? Like super dark bread has a very intense, sharp flavor. Slightly toasted bread, not so much, right? So you've got to play all those things in. A lot of times with Irish whiskeys, they'll do a few years in a second or third or fifth use bourbon barrel, and then they'll roll it over into a sherry cask, and it's going to pick up notes from that sherry wine or whatever. Some American distilleries do this too, by the way. Maker's Mark 46, after they age in the new white oak charred barrel that they're required to by law, they'll then roll it over and age it a second time in a toasted French oak. And it really does, like, Bill, I know you've had that particular bourbon. It's very different than the regular Maker's Mark, right?
100%. And to answer your question about what drinks I would use this for, so I've been enjoying a lot of Amaro and Campari lately, which is all your fault, right? Like you're the one who introduced these ingredients to me. And I think the Wild Turkey 101 is something I would pair with those ingredients because they're good and I do enjoy them, but they're very strong ingredients which tend to overpower the flavor of the bourbon that I enjoy. And I think that a higher proof bourbon like this, which has got, and listeners, typically if I'm just sipping a bourbon, I'll sip a wheated bourbon, which is softer. This, because it's got rye as a secondary ingredient, I think it would stand up to the Amari or the Campari better. So yeah, I think something like a paper airplane, something like a Boulevardier, I think that's what I use this for. So am I like terribly wildly off base there, John?
No, I don't think so at all. I'm wondering, Bill, since you don't like rye whiskey and Manhattans usually call for rye, although they can be made with bourbons, have you ever done a Manhattan with Wild Turkey?
So I have not, and I actually may make that my closing cocktail tonight. I will also say, John, that at my favorite bar in my town, I've had Manhattans before. they always just pour it with whatever whiskey they're using that day, and it is delicious. And I think I'm going to, whatever, I think I'm going to get you and the bartender there involved in a conversation with one another eventually. But sure, I may go make myself a Manhattan later on tonight as my nightcap with
Yeah,
the Wild Turkey 101.
I think that one does well, but I am actually going to make my favorite wild turkey drink, and it's the one you could do on Southwest Airlines. Wild turkey and Coke Zero, which is my default order on a Southwest airplane.
Or,
Even if it's 7 in
and
the
hear
morning.
me out, just drink the Wild Turkey.
And you certainly can if you don't enjoy having a highball where you're mixing that. Like you don't like soft drinks as a rule. There's nothing wrong. Like I will drink this neat. I will drink this on the rocks. I like a good whiskey and Coke, and Coke Zero and Wild Turkey is one of my favorites. All right, Bill. On that note, do you think we should quit beating this dead horse and jump into some news? Oh, wait, our main story, Bill.
Well, our main story is critically important because we've only talked about it like 2 or 3 times at this point. So yeah, John, what did you like about staying at the W? Because we have, and listeners, if you haven't listened to episodes 51 through 54, you should. We've talked about the pool, which was lovely. We've talked about the challenges we have because their customer service sucks worse than whichever political candidate you happen to not like. But there were also some very good things about staying at the W. And for that matter, just staying there at that part of the South Vegas Strip. So, John, what did you enjoy? Because this is our main story for tonight. What did you enjoy about staying at the W?
So the W, let me preface this. 9 times out of 10, when I'm going to Vegas, the kind of trip I want to have, the W is not going to be my first choice. But for all the reasons why I would not choose the W 9 times out of 10, it turns out that for this trip, the W was exactly what I needed. First of all, the W is a quiet retreat from the madness of the Strip. Not only are you down on the south end of the Strip, but the W, you go down this long, beautiful hallway, and you are far away from all the noise on the casino floor. So you get a getaway. The rooms are beautiful. The lobby spaces are beautiful and quiet, right? Anybody that's been to the lobby of the Bellagio, gorgeous as the Bellagio is, that is not a quiet lobby space. It
No.
just isn't. But the W is relaxing. It's calm. There are those big giant rocks in the entryway when you first get there and get dropped off by your taxi or ride share. The rooms are serene and beautiful. You're a long way from the action, but I talked about a couple episodes ago that I kind of had a mental health night Friday night, went back to my room. It turns out I needed a getaway. So if you need some peace and quiet, but you want to be able to get to the action relatively easy, but you also want to be able to have a quiet retreat, the W does that. I think it would be great for if my wife was there, it'd make a great romantic getaway, but just from somebody who out of one of my 3 nights in Vegas, I needed one quiet night. Yeah, if I'd been on Fremont Street with that sound coming through my windows the first night, I think I would have lost my mind. So gorgeous, serene, calm, beautiful.
So, John, I agree with everything you just said. It is a calm, serene, and beautiful place, and that is something which matters very much. Can I add one thing into the it's a calm place
Absolutely.
description? So, have you
Yes.
ever enjoyed a drink down in the bar at the W?
No, both times that I went by, I happened to catch it when they weren't open. I did grab both adult and non-adult beverages from the VIP lounge, and I did grab my coffee and I drank it in that space right in front of the bar, and I could see into the bar. Really great space. The bar is a great space.
So, I didn't have a drink on this trip, but I've had drinks there before. And is it the very best bar in the world? It is not, but it's still a very good bar. And it is that similar quiet, relaxed ambiance. So, listeners, if you are 23 years old and you want a happening party atmosphere, I think what John and I are both saying is that the W is not for you. But if you are, so John, what are we? Like in our mid 30s now, maybe something like that? Yeah.
5-0.
Yeah. You know what? I
Hold
don't
on.
even know what you're saying. If
Yeah.
you are if you are a person of fully developed age and you
If
don't
you
want
are
it to be,
vintage,
yes, if you're vintage, then the W is a quieter space. And in addition to the rooms being a quiet retreat, the bar is a quiet retreat with, again, it's not like you're off at some place 12 miles from the strip. You are a 1 minute walk inside an air conditioned hallway from the Mandalay Bay and from there another 2 minute walk to the Luxor. Like it's fine. It's
yeah,
just that your space is quiet.
yeah, and I don't think even now that I've not signed up, but I qualify for AARP. God, how did I get this old? Anyway, again, most of the time I don't want this trip, but if listeners, if you're looking for that quiet stay, close to the action but quiet, and you want something a little higher end, yeah, Bill, like I said, it's not my favorite place. I wouldn't go 9 times out of 10, but boy, howdy, that's exactly what I needed. And I will also say this: we talked about our customer service hiccups. The staff really was nice to me. I know you had an incident with that one guy, but the majority of
Yeah.
this, yeah, the majority of the staff were nice, at least the ones I dealt with. I know we had issues. We covered that in our previous podcast. Um, Most of the customers were really laid back. Most of them made more money than me. So I did kind of feel like security was going to drag me out of there at some point. But yeah, good spot, Bill. If I'm ranking it, it would be on the bottom half, but that's not a bad thing. It's not that it's a bad space. It's just not what I normally want in Vegas. Bill, how do you rate this, and how often would you want to revisit that experience?
So, first, let me talk about what my favorite part of it is, and that is that in the standard suite, you have 1.5 bathrooms. And if I'm at the W, there's probably going to be somebody else in my room at some point, like watching football, talking, or whatever. And if they've got to do what they've got to do, I don't want them going into my bedroom, and I certainly don't want them on my toilet because I met all y'all, and you're not welcome there. There is an extra half bathroom, and that matters very much. And I want to say, like you, that the W is not a place that I would stay very often, but including the times when it was the Delano, I've stayed there at least 3, maybe 4 times. So theoretically, it's not a place I would stay very often, but practically, it's a place I wind up staying quite a bit because the rates are reasonable, the rooms are huge, the ambiance is relaxed, and I'm right next to whatever it is I need.
And as we've just learned, where other people number two is your number one priority in choosing a hotel room. On that note, Bill, why don't you lead us into the news?
All right. Well, Scott at Vital Vegas, and listeners, if you've never listened to this podcast before, welcome. And if you have, you'll know the lie I'm about to tell because we've totally never quoted his stories before. But Scott at Vital Vegas reports that the Hard Rock has removed the statues of the sirens from the Mirage auction rather, and will instead display them at the Hard Rock as nostalgia pieces. So, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of episodes ago, we reported about the auction that the Hard Rock Hotel was having about the pieces of the hotel formerly known as the Mirage. I'm not going to lie, I actually really like this story because I used to love the Mirage as the hotel, and changes got to happen. Fine. I love the fact that they're giving a nod to Vegas history and keeping some of those pieces around. John, is this something you care about at all?
So yeah, deeply. Like you, I love the Mirage. I only stayed there 3 times, but I haven't been going to Vegas nearly as long as you. I love that location because I love the juxtaposition that I could hop on over to TI or Casino Royale if I wanted some cheap stuff, but I could also hop over to the Wynn or Venetian Palazzo pretty easy. Caesars is right there. I think that is such a fantastic location. And when it was the Mirage, before it got the update it's about to get, the rooms were still nice. They were showing their age, but Steve Wynn really did a great job of designing that property. And yeah, I can't wait for the Hard Rock to open. I'm glad they're keeping things. My only regret is you're a rock and roll hotel. You're keeping some nostalgia. I wish the Beatles Love Show was staying, but yeah, I'm excited by this. I'm glad the sirens will be there to greet us, Bill.
Do you remember when we lost my brother-in-law Mark at the Beatles show?
Yes, I do. I think the
Yeah.
Beatles were just too much. Mark was in a very psychedelic mindset.
God rest his soul. I miss him, and I remember that trip. He's like, "You guys don't go to sleep on me," and then whatever.
Yeah. And then we don't
Go with
know.
God.
Vegas took him.
Yeah.
All right. So another Scott story, and other users on X got into this too. There's a thread where they were observing, and this is sad for both of us, Bill. Emmitt's was dark over the weekend, and you can no longer book room tables through Open Table. I tried the other day when I put this on the run sheet. I tried again today. It looks like Mr. Smith's lovely steakhouse that you and I both thought was an underspoken about, underappreciated gem. Looks like it's no more, which is sad.
So that is sad. I've still got video of it up on the Dine Drink Vegas YouTube channel. But like they had a great sushi bar. They had great steaks. The prices were not cheap, but they were good for Vegas. It was across the sidewalk, so it was 8 feet from my favorite cigar bar in Las Vegas. So yeah, for me, this is a real loss. And I think it's just because like that location downstairs in the Fashion Show Mall, it's hard to attract walk-by customers. I don't care about the Cowboys the way you do, but gosh, that was a good steakhouse. So yeah, I am. If this is what it looks to be, I am sad to see it go, John.
Yeah, me too. I think. I wish more people had heeded our advice and gone. I don't just feel bad for Mr. Smith that his venture failed. I feel like Vegas travelers missed an opportunity because, like you said, it's not cheap, but the quality was on par with the big resort steakhouses, and it was significantly less expensive than them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, in other Vegas news, and what is, I think, the last of our stories from Scott at Vital Vegas, he noted that tonight's show, I mean, we were recording this on Tuesday, the 23rd of September, but tonight's show at the Strat by ventriloquist Terry Fator will be the end of his 18-year run on the Strip, dating back to winning season 2 of America's Got Talent. And listeners, it's not that I care about this particular show. I don't. It's that one of the great Vegas institutions is shows, whether it is comedians, whether it is singers, whether it is whatever it is, but shows that will have very long runs because they've found an audience and they've got loyal patrons and they've got people who will keep coming back. So it looks like that show has a well within, so we are recording this before the showtime in Vegas, but it looks like that show will in a few hours, and by the time this episode drops, have gone dark. John, is this one you ever had any interest in going to?
Not really. I caught some of his act on YouTube. He was okay. He was very talented. Just wasn't my kind of humor. But listeners, if he was one of your favorite acts and you feel bad about this and you're going to miss out on your talking dummies in Vegas, don't worry. Every week, Bill and I drop an episode so you can have talking dummies about Vegas. So we got you covered. All right. Las Vegas Weekly shared details about the new Taco Escobar, which we talked about the planning for that in a previous episode. And they talked about some of the food items. The 2 points I wanted to highlight on their coverage, Bill. Number one, it looks like their tacos are running $4 to $6. So you could probably get out of there. If you want 2 tacos and a water, you can probably get out of there for $12. If you want to have 3 tacos and a beer, $25-$30 with tax and tip. So not bad by Vegas prices. So I wanted to point that out. The other thing is that the ownership group also owns Evil Pie, which is directly across the street, and your favorite pre-French menu cocktail joint, the Golden Tiki in Chinatown. So, Bill, what do you think? I know we're sad about Pinche's Tacos, but are you excited to try Taco Escobar the next time we're downtown?
So first, the fact that you think Golden Tiki should exist within 500 miles of a decent French restaurant is a sign that you're a terrible, very bad, no good person. That was like, this is one of the only fights I'm willing to have with you. So listeners, here's what the fight was. John thinks I don't like tiki bars. I do. They're a lot of fun. But John took us to this super sugary, syrupy, sweet tiki bar right before we went into a high-end French meal. Like by right before, I mean like 2 minutes before we went in. And no, one of these things is not like the other. Now, as for Taco Escobar, yeah, I will absolutely try it. But John, I've got bad news, and I don't want you to pass moral judgment on me. Because I know that I've never had alcohol before. I've certainly never had it in Vegas, and I've absolutely never had it in downtown Las Vegas. But if I'm going to go to Taco Escobar immediately off the Fremont Street experience, it's probably going to be immediately after I've had alcohol for the first time in my life, ever, like ever. And that's the mind frame I'm going to be in when I go there.
Yes, and they have a full bar, so they can help you with that.
All right. Well, although it's tacos, what I probably want is a beer, right?
Yeah, or a margarita.
Yeah, or that.
Or a beer-arita. I don't know if they do those.
Yeah, whatever.
So that may be a future drink of the day.
According to a user on X whose name I can't actually pronounce, but it is spelled VMATKWRST. According to that guy on X.
Hold on, Bill.
Yes.
I was drunk when I added this to the run sheet. That's at the Mark West. I apologize.
Okay. That makes way more sense. So according to the Mark West on X, the Excalibur now offers $5 blackjack 24/7, and I think that is a great deal, particularly if you're learning to play the game. But to answer your question, John, no, I don't want to stay at the Excalibur, because if I don't have the money to stay at a decent hotel in Vegas, you know what I'll do? Just stay home and have some decent whiskey, because I do have the money for that.
But I will say, if you're in a tower room at the Luxor, or if you're in one of the nicer rooms at New York, it is a very short walk to get to the Excalibur Casino. And I get it, the Dirty Castle does not have a reputation for great rooms, although I still want us to split the 2-bedroom suite at some point, just out of curiosity. Just think about the video value for the channel. But I do think that, the Dirty Castle, mediocre rooms, the restaurant selection's not great. I think that's a fun casino floor. I really do. I like being in the casino floor. Even I might sit at a blackjack table at that price.
I think that's fair.
Let's move on from that. In the next post on September 19th, Las Vegas locally said, Caesars properties on the Strip are offering 25% off food and beverage at 100-plus restaurants, as well as free parking to Las Vegas locals. This deal will run through October 30th. They're going to cut it off for Halloween night. What do you think, Bill? Should we move to Vegas so we could take advantage?
I feel like if I do move to Vegas, my wife is going to leave me. And it was really hard to find the first girl. And frankly, I'm old, I'm tired. I don't want to put the effort into finding a second girl. But you know what? I think this is a sign of what we've been talking about for several months now. Vegas has outpriced themselves. And I very much hope that this sort of effort is successful in getting, more people either back to Vegas or to try Vegas for the first time.
Well, and I think aimed at locals, I think this is realizing you've got a couple million people in your backyard who don't go to the Strip because it's a hassle and it's overpriced and there's a lot of locals options. We covered in a previous episode that Stations Casinos has not lost money during all of this, which means that the casino chains that cater to locals are doing just fine financially. Thank you very much. And I think the Strip operators have just ignored the locals market to their peril. As out-of-town visitors drop, they got to get those locals in there. So I think this is long overdue. I think any tourist destination ought to also do right by their local population. But, I've lived in Dallas and been frustrated that I couldn't get a price break at Six Flags, and I got to be crammed in there with people from Jowl, New Mexico, and that's an unpleasant experience. So, charge me $5 less for a pink thing and let me get on the rides.
Fair. Well, John, in our last news story for the night, do you remember the 2023 cyber attack that cost MGM something like $100 million where someone messed them up pretty bad?
So the incident that almost certainly had to be masterminded by international sophisticated hackers and a crack team, almost like something straight out of Ocean's 11.
Absolutely. And do you remember that terrible, very bad, no good cocktail that we made as a result on, I think it was episode 11 or 12?
Yes, where ChatGPT told us to do things nobody should ever do. Do not rim your glass with graham cracker crust.
Oh no, Lord,
Only sadness awaits.
that was terrible.
Also,
Well,
graham cracker and blue carousel. Ugh.
ugh. Well, it turns out that whole attack was conducted by a teenager, and the authorities have now made an arrest. Now, to be clear, folks, we're not going to use the teenager's name because while there's been arrest made, there has been no conviction. That person is absolutely entitled to a trial. They are absolutely entitled to have their story told, and we're not going to give those details. But what the authorities are telling us right now is that an arrest has been made of a teenager, which means that MGM got shut down by some kid the age of my kids and John's kids. By the way, John, I'm pretty sure neither of my children has been arrested. Have any of your children been arrested this week? Please tell me this wasn't one of your kids that just got arrested.
None of them have been arrested this week.
All right, cool.
So
then it's good.
It's a good week. It's only Tuesday. It's only Tuesday. They still have a chance.
It is. But you know what? Not for this. So, ladies and gentlemen, public service announcement. If somebody calls you from tech support, they're probably not from tech support because they wouldn't have called you, because that's how this whole thing got engineered in the first place. And I trust that MGM now has better cybersecurity protocols and has almost put the money that they're clearly no longer spending on customer service into protecting their cybersecurity apparatus.
Yeah, that or let my data get stolen, but give me a 99-cent shrimp cocktail. All right. On that note, I think it's time that we wrap this up, Bill. So why don't you tell the listeners where they could find more fine and outstanding Dine, Drink, Travel, and Dine, Drink Vegas content?
Well, frankly, John, they can't find any fine and outstanding content, but if you want to find the stuff that we do, you can find us on YouTube at Dine Drink Vegas, where we produce short and focused videos which give you the information that you need to plan your next trip to Vegas. Tends to be videos about 5 or 10 minutes on a topic such as what is this restaurant like, or what is it like to stay in this hotel room. You can also find our short form content on Dine Drink Vegas Shorts, and you can find us on YouTube at Dine Drink Travel if you want information about air travel, including the lounges in the Las Vegas airport. You can find us on most social media platforms, including Instagram. You can find us on X. You can find us on Facebook at Dine Drink Travel. And you can find us on Blue Sky at Dine Drink Build. And probably the best platform, though, is X, where I argue with John because he's wrong and I'm right, and that's just the way things are. John, where can they find you on X?
I am at Dine Drink John. I'm happy to talk to you about Las Vegas, about travel, about cooking, about coffee, about cocktails, and about why Jerry Jones is the worst general manager in the history of professional sports, or anything else you would like to chat about. We thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you have a friend planning a trip to Vegas who could benefit from our sage wisdom, or a mortal enemy that hates listening to old, fat, white Southern guys talk, either way, please share this podcast with them. You'll be helping us build an audience so we can keep bringing you this fine content. We're so glad you tuned in. Thanks for listening. And until the next episode, happy travels.